group is not a clinical group, so beware. Show me the data, and I can stamp this then as plant-based bias, just to warn you. Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and this video will be a reacts video to the myths surrounding low-carb diets for diabetes explained from Mastering Diabetes. We have an upcoming 7-day Start Keto Right challenge. The dates are set May 9 through 15, and I'll tell you more about that at the end of the video. So this video was sent to me. It's the third one from Mastering Diabetes, this group led by really smart, super smart leaders who have what I'm learning is a plant-based bias. And it seems like that really makes it difficult to see beyond the old paradigm, which is that the fats are bad and meat is bad, and it doesn't incorporate the new information about nutritional ketosis being a healthy thing to do. So let's see what this video says. The myths surrounding low-carb diets for diabetes explained.
If you're living with any form of diabetes, you may have been recommended to eat a low-carbohydrate diet like a paleo diet or an Atkins diet or a keto diet. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be alone in receiving this recommendation because millions of people have been mistakenly prescribed a low-carbohydrate diet in an attempt to lose weight, improve their cardiovascular health, and lower their blood glucose. Here's the problem. It's not a good idea because even though it's going to result in suppressing your blood glucose and suppressing your A1C in the short term, it can actually increase your chronic disease risk in the long term. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. The misconceptions that may have led to the common recommendation to eat a ketogenic diet are all over social media right now. And they're telling you that carbohydrates are your enemy and that saturated fat is your friend. I'm here to...
So time out. Diabetes is a condition of elevated blood sugar, or glucose specifically. Foods that have carbohydrates in them will be digested to sugar if it has glucose in that starch molecule, and most of them do, and the blood glucose will go up. This is the postprandial rise of glucose after a mixed meal with carbohydrates. So 100 years ago, before there were any medications to use for diabetes, a low-carb diet was the only thing they had, and it was a very effective tool. And in my office, I have a list of foods from a book from 1923, and I show people that. And so actually, carbohydrates, if you can tolerate them, great, and they're tasty, and they might even have addictive element for you. And then the old paradigm, again, believes that saturated fat is bad, and Arnie Astrup and his group of investigators, scientists from all around the world, have an excellent paper that basically says that the old concern about saturated fat is unfounded. So we have all these clinical people who are this group is not a clinical group, and so beware that there are influencers who have no clinical experience, no medical experience. I value that as a physician myself, but the idea that someone even might you can know by wearing a continuous glucose monitor or checking a blood sugar level, test a food and check your blood sugar an hour later. And you'll see that it's the foods that are high in carbohydrate that raise that blood glucose. Now, some people pump out insulin to lower the blood glucose so you don't have much of a rise. Other people need lots of insulin to keep that down, and we don't think that's a good idea in the long run. So you want to eat to keep your insulin down and your blood glucose down, and I think there are a lot of ways to do it. And then there's this group, they're promoting these strange, long fears about eating this way without data, at least up till this video. Let's see if there's some presented.
I'm here to tell you that that is not a true statement. Let's get right into it. Now, specifically when it comes to blood sugar control or blood glucose control, most people believe that eating carbs is what's going to make them diabetic, or eating sugar is going to make them diabetic. And the truth is that eating anything that's refined, like cookies, crackers, chips, pastas, breads, and sodas, these are all foods that are going to increase your chronic disease risk and certainly increase your blood glucose and lead you towards more chronic disease. I'm not arguing that. The point
So fascinating how believe is often used in a pejorative way, like, we know that's not true, they believe it. Here it's science, which science is, I guess some people, the real skeptics say it's a belief system, but actually science is replicatable, and so the hallmark of science is replication. That's, if you have a donut, your blood glucose goes up. If I have a donut, the blood glucose goes up. If I have an egg, you have an egg, the blood glucose doesn't go up. That's called science, not belief. So it's something that you're going to see in everybody. The carbs make your blood glucose goes up.
Here is that when you avoid eating carbohydrate-rich foods, if you also avoid eating whole carbohydrate-rich foods, you might actually be doing yourself a disservice. And these include foods like fruits and starchy vegetables and legumes and whole grains. These foods are actually incredibly nutrient dense and foods that you should be increasing, not decreasing.
So there are a lot of ways to be healthy. And I can see this a super smart doctor here, PhD, trying to figure out health without clinical experience. And you don't have to have fruit. I mean, you don't. There are some people that have never had fruit and they're fine. You don't have to have vegetable. Well, I think you should have some, but because there are no scientific studies yet saying don't have any veggies yet, but I think they'll be coming. That's that carnivore subgroup under subreddit, low carb carnivore. You can be healthy eating lots of different things. And in fact, going to whole food, fruit, vegetable, if you came from a typical American diet, which he showed was we all have that common understanding that ultra-processed food and with a lot of sugar in it, that's really kind of the bad guy. It's interesting how this young scientists bring in and it might even be the kind of false assumption that plant-based diets are better for the planet, which they really aren't. In fact, without animals and ruminant agriculture, we have no topsoil with that. So there's another point of view to the idea that plant-based diets will save humanity, and I'll even hurt myself on a plant-based diet so I can save humanity. I've seen people tell me that's a little bit crazy. So my perspective is I want to use a tool that's helpful and good for the planet. Don't get me wrong. I'm worried about that too. But there are other things that can be done, not just dietary change. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and I know you don't need the fruit and vegetables that he's saying that everyone should eat more of. Well, if you're coming from the standard American diet, sure, you should eat more of those if you want. If you're coming from the keto diet, no, you don't need more of those. So interesting sort of selection of perspectives, which is a little bit limiting when you start then blaming the programs that don't look like yours. That a lot of judging without any sort of data behind it. But well, maybe there is. Let's see.
Decreasing. And the reason is simple. These foods are rich in vitamins and minerals and fiber and water and antioxidants and phytochemicals. And these are all very important micronutrients that have very specific disease fighting capacity. Now, all of these compounds are good for you. And a lot of them are actually associated with lower risk of both prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So it doesn't
Great point. You can get nutrition from food. You can also get that kind of nutrition from other food. So it's not really not a good debatable issue. Low-carb diets have all the nutrition you need. But if you're learning, like doctors from companies, and where do you get your orange juice if you don't, where do you get your vitamin C if you don't have orange juice? Because of the marketing that we've been under, actually you can get enough vitamin C from diet without orange juice. So even without fruit. I know that sounds really controversial, but that's what the science says, actually. So back to the myths.
Really makes sense to cut out all carbohydrates, because if you do, then you're going to be missing those that actually have very healthful properties. Now, here's what most people do. They try and avoid eating all carbohydrate-rich foods, and in substitution for that, they eat more foods that are higher in fat. And if we're really going to get super nerdy about it, let's get down to brass tacks. Now, carbohydrates contain 4 calories per gram, and fat contains 9 calories per gram, which is slightly more than double. That means that when you eat fat-rich foods, because you're trying to eat a low-carbohydrate diet, because you're trying to avoid carbohydrate-rich foods, your digestive system actually distends a little bit less because you have to eat less food in order to take on the same number of calories. On the contrary, when you eat foods that are rich in fiber, that generally contain more carbohydrate energy, the fiber and water, otherwise known as bulk, distends your digestive system, and that sends a signal up into your brain. It's a neurological signal.
So, yeah, Dr. Cyrus, you've never been in a clinic. Yeah, those fibers, in fact, the heavily complex carbs can not only cause distension, well, the distension is gas. So flatus, I would rather, but a good point is that you get more calories per gram by eating fat, because there are more calories per gram, so you eat less and you lose weight, actually. And you wouldn't know that unless you were in an office. I had to visit Dr. Atkins in 1998, a doctor who was actually in the clinic, to overcome, probably 10 or 15 different distractions and barriers and all. And I have that policy at my clinic at Duke. If you're a health practitioner and you want to come shadow me, sending information about you, I can't just let anyone do that, signing forms and all too. You can come watch it in action, and you wouldn't believe unless you saw it, because there's so many, you're not having fruits, you're not having vegetables, oh my goodness, but it's kind of sad that this might be seen as the highest level of evidence about low-carb diets. But again, maybe it's just preaching to a choir of plant-based. You wouldn't want to go into a church and start talking about God doesn't exist. I mean, that because we're talking about a belief system, but science really should be above that. So careful of the source.
Signal from your digestive system that says, hey, I'm full, slow down. Now, in your digestive system, bulk stretches the walls of your stomach and your small intestine.
What's interesting, that's another paradigm thing about satiety of foods. And the old teaching was you need to have protein to feel full. Well, that's if you were eating carbohydrates. Most people who come to me and follow a reasonable whole food kind of low carb keto diet aren't even hungry in the morning, and they drop breakfast. And so my approach is eat if you're hungry, don't eat if you're not hungry. Gosh, I haven't had breakfast in years, and it's not the most important meal of the day. And, so a lot of things have to be unlearned, definitely. And the idea that you need some kind of carbohydrate to make you feel full because of the fullness, well, that actually went into a book that was based on fiber and bulking up. It was volumetrics. I remember that. You just have a head of lettuce and you're all full and you won't eat much, or drink a gallon of water before the meal, and that it'll solve the problem. Well, that's not sustainable. And so you want to come up with foods that you like, enjoy, even love and crave, that don't cause that blood glucose and insulin rise, which is actually what diabetes is. And we've kind of gotten off topic of the myths surrounding diet for diabetes. We're talking about fiber now, I think, and why carbs are so important. Right. I wonder if by the end we'll get the promo for plant-based. And I can stamp this then as plant-based bias, just to warn you.
And your large intestine, and that sends these neurological signals up to your brain relatively quickly. This happens also with fat-rich foods, but it happens a little bit slower, and it also definitely happens a lot less slower when you're consuming foods that are high in refined oils, because oils have a very small volume and they don't distend your digestive system in the same way that foods that contain bulk do. So that's one of the reasons that when you eat foods that are higher in fat, you can actually take on more calories without even knowing it, simply because there's less digestion distension inside of your digestive system. Now, here's where things get just a little bit confusing, because you've probably read on the internet, or maybe you've experienced it yourself. You eat a low carbohydrate diet, or a ketogenic diet in particular, and you get all these amazing health benefits. You see weight loss, especially rapid weight loss. You see lower triglyceride values. You see a lower A1C value. You see lower fasting blood glucose, and your blood pressure might also drop itself. So you might think to yourself, well, I started eating this ketogenic diet and all these things came along for the improvement. So why would you tell me that eating a ketogenic diet is not good for me, Cyrus? That doesn't.
Right? I don't know. Oh, this is the debate thing about, oh, well, but it's going to come get you. Even I was reminiscing back to the great nutrition debate. It was, I think, the year 2000, and you can actually see a historical YouTube video of it. And Dr. Atkins was there, Dr. Ornish, all of the other sort of diet gurus at the time, and the leader of the conference got up. This was up at the USDA in Washington D.C. and said, welcome to the low carb, or no, to the diet book author debate, because everyone had their own books there. And no, I think it was even more kind of welcome to the $1 million debate. Anyway, it was made fun of because these doctors trying to get their information out wrote books, not on the necessarily to make money, but to get the information out, because the standard medical world is just so far afield, and the USDA pyramid was just from lobbying from companies. There was no data behind it. But so I remembered even back then that people were saying, oh, it's going to come get you, and you can lose weight, you're taking chemotherapy, Dr. Ornish said. And it's like, oh, wait a sec. This is not. If you want information about keto diets, talk to doctors or researchers who've studied the keto diet, not a group that has no agenda other than to get you to not eat a keto diet. So if your health is improving, I wouldn't listen to and be persuaded by this yet. But let's see, the shoe may drop, right?
Doesn't make any sense. Okay. The reason is because these short-term results can be deceptive, and they can be a ticking time bomb in the long term, because the research shows that when you eat foods that are high in fat and high in protein, especially from the animal world, that the short-term results are much less important than the long-term results, and the long-term results can actually lead you to more chronic disease risk. Now, the ketogenic diet was originally developed.
What? Show me the data. I mean, that's just. Again, I'm reminded of the old musical Music Man, where the hustler comes to town and creates a big band for the children and doesn't teach them. He wants to sell them the instruments and get out of town. And to drum up a crisis, you have to have a crisis. He's called out that pool hall down there, and we got trouble. You're eating saturated fat. No, don't believe your own lying eyes that everything is better. I don't know. I can't go on. I think I'm going to stamp this Mastering Diabetes group as plant-based bias, no clinical keto evidence, and yeah, they do go on and cite another, cherry pick another study, which is just not a fair sort of unbiased source of information. And I really do hope, especially because the promoters, or promoters behind Mastering Diabetes apparently have type 1 diabetes themselves. The group that followed Dr. Richard K. Bernstein, who has type 1 diabetes himself, has a book called The Diabetes Solution, has kind of spawned a bunch of people through a Facebook group called Type 1 Grit. And the less carb you eat, the less insulin you need, even with type 1 diabetes. And the stories I've heard about the parents being upset, worried about their children having low blood sugars and actually not waking up is real. And then you cut carbs out and cut the insulin down, you don't get these low blood sugars. And that was in a paper in the journal Pediatrics, which was a survey of these people in that Facebook group called Type 1 Grit. So anyway, I hope not to the. So if you're doing well, you're my patient. You don't need to watch these Mastering Diabetes videos. Hope that's helpful. Now, what you can do if you haven't gotten started on a keto diet, you're curious about it, or you want to reboot, Adapt Your Life Academy has a 7-day Start Keto the Right Way challenge coming up. And the dates are set. It's May 9 through 15. We've done this before, and it's hugely popular, and people, you'll lose weight almost guaranteed unless you're on medications and all that in this first 3-week period. You get put in a private Facebook group, and we will support you for 3 weeks with admins, and actually people support each other. It's so gratifying to see. So for $9, you can join. You get the value, the $9.99 sheet of foods called Page 4 online, but you also get daily lives from myself and our nutritionist, Amy Berger, and then you get this private Facebook group to get you started. There's more information in the link down below in the description, or you can go to adaptyourlifeacademy.com and get more information, sign up on the wait list for the 7-day Start Keto Right Challenge. Hope to see you there. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.